This is the latest development of the circuit I've been working on due to the inspiration of William Beatty. He brought up his deviation or variation on Tesla's Tesla coil by putting the terminus on both ends and two primaries at either end. Now I went and removed the primaries from this simulation, but I would imagine that the so-called primaries, which now become secondaries, the whole thing becomes inverted, and the narrow coil, long narrow coil, is the primary. Be that as it may, these two large coils could be motor coils. That's what I'm envisioning. And then if we put a switch on these coils, we can turn them on or off. That would be, or a resistor, a potentiometer, or maybe a variable capacitor. I'm not sure how is the best way to vary the motor current, voltage, whatever. But what I did was I put a throttle on one of the capacitors, and by changing its capacitance can change the voltage accumulation on this. So I'm imagining that what Tesla did in his Pierce arrow demonstration, and also the Amman brothers 10 years prior in 1921 with their EV conversion, what I'm imagining is that since there was no motor controllers in that day, and the throttle or accelerator pedal only had on versus off, there was no difference in speed. For the cheaper models, like the Model T, and I'm sure the Amman brothers didn't do any differently. You simply had one speed, and you either went that speed or you didn't. You came to a complete stop. So it was kind of like a golf cart, basically. While Tesla had a true accelerator pedal on his Pierce arrow demonstration, which he could achieve various speeds in excess of a golf cart, such as 90 miles an hour. So obviously there's a lot of wiggle room. This is just the power supply. So what I'm imagining, though, is without the aid of a motor controller, if you were just experimenting, then all you get to do is turn the throttle off and on to pulse the amount of energy, the duration of the energy that you're imparting to the motor. And since momentum means something, like on a flywheel or on a moving vehicle, then you're already in motion, so all you have to do is pulse to keep your cruising speed, or maybe pulse a little extra if you want to accelerate, and then use your brakes to brake or slow down. So I'm sure there are simple ways of doing this, and there's much more sophisticated ways of doing this. Whatever works. As Trevor Constable would say, only results count. Now, so you have to use your imagination, because this is version 10. Version 8 is already posted on my website, vinyasi.info/energy. This is a modification in which I learned how to make improvements. Now, you could increase the number of inductors that are in parallel, but it doesn't seem to help. What really helps reduce the need to run the simulation for any long duration in order to achieve that breakthrough of explosive acceleration, or I should say exponential rise of voltage, is to increase the number of capacitors that are in parallel in the left-hand side. Namely, a capacitor, a hollow sphere is only one capacitor. But if we do an electronic component equivalent, we can put as many capacitors as we want to in parallel with each other, all radially coming out from a center spine. And then the other end of the capacitors are grafted to the outside of the circle that shorts out all of their outside terminals and connects with the lone inductor. So over on the right-hand side, I reduced it to one capacitor so that the parallel capacitance is the least, while I increased as many as I could fit on the schematic as I wanted to put. You could put more. And when you put more, it stabilizes the circuit so that now you can increase the capacitances of some of these capacitors, not all of them. So I raised some of them to 100 picofarads, while others are merely 10 picofarads, and you'll notice the endpoint is a little different on some of them, so that helps prevent matrix's singular error. But that's not an error because I only run the thing for 10 seconds now. Before I ran it for the equivalent, the simulator equivalent of what would be our 2.5 days. But now I don't have to do that, 10 seconds. And that's pretty good. So in 10 seconds you can achieve 400, oh here it is, 400 volts. 400 volts as measured on this throttling capacitor. Now, you can't measure that on the inductor because it's the same on both terminals pretty much. So you're only going to get a little voltage and a scant amount of current. So the only place to really get anything is voltage only and on this lone capacitor over here with reference to ground. Let's see. So one of the capacitors down here, it has 1 microvolt pre-charge before you start the simulation, and then it just escalates within 10 seconds to 400 volts. Now you can get as many volts as you want. It's just a question of how many do you need and how quickly can you get it, because you don't want to have to wait. If you're going to be taking amp hours off of this and there's not a whole lot of amp hours to take off, then you're going to want to take them off very frequently. Unfortunately, you have to wait 10 seconds and you only get a little bit. So that's why I'm thinking to put parallel capacitors here. Maybe it should be taken off of all of these capacitors, not this one. This one should be the throttle, but the voltage to power the motor should maybe be taken off of these capacitors, all of them in parallel, because A, they have a higher capacitance, that means they store more voltage, and B, there's more of them. So the total capacitance is much greater. So that's what I think should be done in order to run the motor. So unlike this graphic which puts a large coil surrounding the cylindrical coil, which means we'd have to put a coil around this L1 and inductively transfer what? Current? But there's no current to transfer. See, in this model, all we can get out of this is voltage, and so the best place to get it are capacitors, and the best place to find it are in all of the capacitors on the left-hand side. So these have to be taken off, shorted out in all of them shorted out simultaneously, or maybe just a few of them or whatever, to periodically charge up the voltage of the EV or whatever power supply that we're trying to supply. Okay, where was I? Blah, 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 blah. Did I do everything? I think I covered everything. Okay, so now we'll just go look at the graphic that is the output on the throttle, though. So, you know, obviously in 10 seconds time, obviously what we end up doing and what I'm showing you are two different things. Now if I can go find the image, there it is. So now this is the other image, and this is the newspaper article that I have to owe a credit of debt and gratitude to the fellow who calls himself Boguslaw, B-O-G-U-S-L-A-W. He's on Energetic Forum, and he got this out of an actual newspaper he got from the library, and he cut it out or scanned this section, and it gives us a little bit of information of how. So now, see, now here's the brass spheres. I read in an article elsewhere on the internet that these brass spheres were put where the headlights were taken out. This is the front end of the car here. These cars were not very big. So the headlights were taken out and these brass spheres were put in their place. And if you blow this up enough, you'll see there's a rod or something coming straight down from each brass sphere and going into the top of this steel drum. This is a steel drum over here. I'm assuming it's steel. Maybe it's wooden. I don't know. Now, he says, he confesses in the article, there is nothing inside the drum that moves. The contents consists, is that consists? Consists only of iron, wire, and minerals. Now, obviously, minerals is quite a mystery. What mineral? Quartz? The iron. What's the iron? Well, if there's an iron bar going through the center of his coil, then he doesn't have to use iron wire. He can use copper wire, and the iron bar would connect the top. If this, that's why I'm assuming it's a steel drum, because if you got an iron core to the coil, linking the top of the drum with the bottom of the drum, and now you've got the drum is iron, you're capturing all of the magnetic field coming out of the coil. Not only the magnetism concentrated in the center of the coil, but even the lesser amount of magnetism surrounding the coil. You're getting all of it, reshaping it, capturing it, and putting it into the iron. And what does he do with it? I don't know. Does he transfer it to the motor? Is it connected to the motor block? So the casing of the motor, is the motor made out of cast iron? The chassis or shell of the motor, possibly. You know, there's all kinds of things he may have done. So I'm assuming this is why I did this circuit, and I've been fooling with it for some months now, trying to figure out how it works. And here I got a simulation that actually works, all due to William Beatty. So I think I've solved this mystery, and I've always felt for quite some time that Tesla replicated them 10 years later and improved upon it and added efficiency. So when we go back to the circuit, what we find is that, what was I going to say? Now I forgot. Oh, the story goes that he bought 12 radio tubes. Oh, and he's getting energy from the ether. Yeah, right. I have dealt with electrical reactants so much, why bother? All you get from the atmosphere is a stimulus. 1 microvolt. You don't need more than that, unless you want to go to the trouble of getting more. And then you use the principles of electrical reactants to recycle that that reactive power in shorter and shorter durations, due to what would appear to be shorter and shorter durations, due to the fact that you're increasing your percentage of recycling. And you know, electrical reactants, all you have to worry about is frequency, capacitance, and inductance. Those are the only 3 factors you have to worry about. And Eric Dollard said that's all the synthesis of electricity amounts to. Time, magnetism, and dielectricity are the exact words he used, which to me means the same thing as frequency, capacitive reactance, and inductive reactance. To me, it's equivalent terminology. He's just using his common sense terms that any layperson could relate to, except for the word dielectric. We would normally say electrostatic, but be that as it may, he comes pretty close to being very good at talking to lay people. And I prefer to use electrical engineering terms because those are the terms of the professionals who are trained in this stuff. So why shouldn't I use their vernacular? Steinmetz did, Heaviside did. They used the term reactive power in reactance. They never said radiant energy. It's the same thing. So I have a little beef with Tesla, the showman, who wanted to take credit for everything and everybody is supposed to depend on him. A little egotism, but he took a lot of stuff to his grave, and one of which is that he confused us with his own terminology. You know? So, I don't have to take energy from the air. I only take a small amount serving as a stimulus, and the rest I get from the manipulation of the recycling of reactive power, which makes it look like I'm manipulating time any way you want to shake it, or it looks like I'm synthesizing electricity out of thin air or from the ether. Call it what you like. All it's doing is recycling reactive power and, of course, correcting for power factors so that you get some real power out of this in the end that is now more than you had before per unit time. This is always critical, per unit time. As Aaron Murakami likes to say, if you took a certain amount of energy within a certain time frame and compressed it into a shorter time frame, wouldn't that be more energy? Yeah, if you could extend it out back to the original time frame and still retain that compression of force, sure. And of course you do that by recycling. You know, Jim Murray and Bedini used switching circuits along with Paul Babcock. That's nice, but I prefer solid state whenever possible. As little moving parts as possible, because switches can get stuck, spark gaps can fail to fire, so they're problematic as well. Simple is always best, and solid state as well. And Tesla did say he had some kind of generator that would last 5,000 years and require no prime mover. Well, wouldn't this kind of look like that? And everybody's firing up their Tesla coil, not knowing you don't have to fire it up. You just wait long enough, which is what I did initially when I didn't know what I was doing. I had to wait 2.5 days of simulator time to get anything to happen, and then kaboom! All this energy seemingly came from nowhere. What was it doing? It was slowly accumulating momentum of acceleration of a surge towards infinite oblivion, very slowly. So when we say exponential, it's really not. I don't think exponential is the right term, because the rate of exponentiation changes. You know, it's a very reactance. Electrical reactance is a very self-feeding phenomenon. The more it feeds itself, the more quickly it feeds. And remember, energy has nothing to do with this. It's all frequency, capacitance, and inductance. So it's whatever energy is resident within the system gets caught up in what's electrically reacting, which is frequency, capacitance, and inductance is changing. Even though you have capacitances and inductances hardwired into the solid materials of construction, the electric and magnetic fields of these components are changing all the time because these various components are acting on each other's fields. This is what Jim Murray has contributed to our knowledge base in his transforming generator, when he says that the two coils on either side of his transforming generator coil change each other's self-inductance by way of via changing their mutual inductance. And that tells me all I need to know about how electrical reactance is able to create parametric amplification, because the components of fixed value are changing the field created by the other components nearby and each other. They act on each other. And when you get that happening, anything is possible at that point, because parametric amplification is not something pseudoscience. It's well known, but it's only used in the audio industry. It's not used for power supplies, insofar as I know about. We'd know about it, but we won't, because it won't be allowed, right? So don't expect. Everybody said, "Oh, why don't you build it and we'll believe you." You know what? I'm holding out on all you guys. I'm not going to build it. You know why? Because I know what'll happen. It's not that it won't work. It's that I won't be able to work and thus make it work. You know, Aaron likes to say on his newsletter, every time some company decides to market Stan Meyer's technology, something weird happens. They always go bankrupt. We got the technology. It's common sense. Everybody's putting YouTube videos up. They're doing it in their garage, but nobody can sell it. You ever wonder why? Maharishi Mahesh Yogi had the same problem with bank loans to fund the TM movement. He had nothing but bad thoughts to say about the banking industry, because they wouldn't come to his assistance. When it's been proven over and over again, when you get a bunch of meditators together, meditating at the same time in the same place, and you have them doing the city program on top of it, you get a reduction of crime and violence throughout the entire planet, especially if you've got 3 groups of 10,000 or 7,000 meditators sprinkled around the planet. I mean, you know, some things are never going to fly very well in today's world. Obviously, this is still the Kali Yuga, and we still require that everybody suffers and are depraved and ignorant, and oh my God. And we play games. Okay, enough soapboxing. So, you see the politics behind it. It has, and don't blame government. Government is just as corrupt as whoever pays their bill. You know, whoever, what do they call those people? You know, companies will hire somebody to get congressmen to write bills and change bills and vote on bills. I forget the term. It's a political term. You know, the government can't be any different than what the people are. And if the people are on the majority either asleep or corrupt or both, then we get what we deserve, nothing less. So don't expect government to come to our rescue. Don't expect to blame government and that somehow that's going to fix anything. it's really all of us, our collective consciousness or lack thereof, that's at the bottom of how things operate in the real world. And so you might get one genius comes along and builds something, and there's been several of them who come up with over-unity devices of all kinds, mechanical, fluidic. Lee Rogers came up with a heat and compression engine involving air, to convert the internal combustion air engine over to not have to, because he figured out, the only thing happening is the expansion of the petroleum, in the cylinder causing the piston to move. So why burn it? Why not just run the thing on compressed air? And he did that, and then he figured out how to run the compressor while he was driving, if he didn't drive slower than 20 miles per hour and any higher than sea level, because he was located in Florida. So it's pretty obvious these things have come and gone and have never seen the light of day, not because they don't work, but because we don't allow the inventor to make it work. Lee Rogers was perfectly willing to not take a triple conjoined offer from the three big automakers coming from Detroit, who offered him $1 billion exclusive deal, because he got a little nervous and, well, you know what, I bet these guys are going to shelve my patent. Just pay me $1 billion and shelve it. Who knows? Maybe they'll murder him after they get done. They certainly offered Stanley Meyer $1 billion to investors from Belgium, and he never got to see the money because he got poisoned to death. So you got to wonder, when somebody offers you $1 billion, what's going on. So Lee Rogers backed down and figured, well, I'll just build a kit and sell it for $1,000, and at least I'll reach some people. I never heard of him selling any. I don't know. Maybe it's only through word of mouth. When I looked up a Lee Rogers in Florida, I found one driving a truck. So, don't quit your day job, right? You're not going to get wealthy off of this kind of technology. That's very much for certain. So I think that's enough soapboxing. I described the circuit, and I think I took it as far as I can do so for all practical purposes. Not that I couldn't take it further, but I can't seem to reduce the duration of the simulation to less than 10 seconds. But I can increase the numbers of capacitors and the total parallel capacitance contained in this modular sphere, this conceptually model of a sphere over here versus this sphere over here. So I could get more voltage if I wanted to, but I'm not sure what I would do with it. Maybe the engagement of the motor would be a shorter duration, even though this thing is engaged for 10 seconds. So this may have its own duration of engagement to keep its voltage level up, and then the engagement of the motor coupled to this, one way or another, would have its own separate engagement duration in order to transfer some of this charge over to the motor. So there's two separate durations that may be involved in a practical implementation of this device into a power supply of a sizable quantity, such as a EV or somebody's home or an apartment complex or whatever. All right, enough said.